No Box Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production, and social media. Don't forget, say no to the box. Dile no a la caja. 고정관념이란 상자에서 벗어나세요.
Hello, and welcome back to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. This is your co-host, Martheya. I am so excited to be back on the mic with you for our 5th season of the show as your host. If you're missing Yejin, Azaria, and Reina throughout this season, don't worry, they're still busy at work behind the scenes of No Box Dance. Last season, we went behind the screen of all things dance and film. And this season, we want to go behind the screen of the business of dance. Our goal this season is to help connect the dots between making work and sharing work with an audience. Enjoy the show! Morgana, welcome to our show. As I was just saying to you before we started the recording, you have worn many hats in the arts world, including an educator for 8 years as a theater director and instructor for Dallas Independent School District, an actor, a director, and more. And I want to kind of dig into the hat that you've worn as a grant reviewer, because I think that would be really helpful for us selfishly at No Box, but I also think for our listeners as well. When you go into a grant review process, what are some things that you see in applications that really stick out in a positive way? And then also on the flip side, things that you're like, throw it in the trash. This is not a good application.
So I think, number one, all of our grant reviewers anywhere need to always go into a space with an unbiased hat on, unbiased lens. Which
is almost impossible to do.
Oh, man.
Right? Because we all come with our implicit biases.
And
especially if you know are already familiar with some organizations and you haven't heard of others and things like that.
And that's where I think the next journey in grant making, although they've been making strides, it's how do we get out of, what are our guidelines doing to create barriers for new artists and smaller organizations to thrive? And so when I go in as a reviewer, I'm going to look at equity in their board, who all is on their board? Is it balanced? Does it have, am I only seeing older white men? Or am I seeing a mix of people that make sense for this particular organization? Mm-hmm. What is their mission? And does their programming align?
And can you give an example of how you might see programming aligning with the mission?
Yeah.
And how they're able to describe that in an application?
So if your programming says that it does, inclusive arts making in the community for youth and on stage for all. Okay.
Listen to all those tag words. Inclusive, community. Those are all those words.
So sometimes people have really vague ones. Sometimes they have real clear. Sometimes it's about youth, but it may be all performance-based, and it's but they talk about training the youth of tomorrow and what does that mean in a wider when we think about training through workshops, or they may say we do performances, but it's only they haven't done the performances yet, or they're do one small performance and it was a one-off, and it's you mostly do a lot of education-based meditation work, or it's something just really random.
So if those things aren't consistent.
Yeah. That's where it's just live up to your mission. If your mission is only wellness, but through the lens of the arts, then that's what it is. And you may not fit into into this performing-based grant.
What I'm hearing you say too is making sure that when you apply for a grant, that you actually are a candidate to receive this grant.
Yes.
Which that's something that's been challenging for No Box at the beginning, because we have a dance film festival. Mm-hmm. And so as a film festival, we're learning we don't necessarily qualify for a performance, right? So if the grant is for a performance, it's not our own work, right? We're curating and then producing an event. of other makers' works.
Mm-hmm.
And so certain grants that typical dance companies apply for, we've learned, we don't qualify for that.
Exactly.
We've learned the hard way. Some of them we've applied for,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the feedback session, they're like, well, it's not really your
Right.
work or things like that. So we're like, okay, that makes sense.
And also grant reviewers, grant makers shouldn't be inviting those styles of orgs that aren't in complete alignment.
The No Box Dance Film Festival, NBFF, is now accepting submissions for its 5th year as an independent film festival. NBFF seeks dance-related films that challenge the possibilities of what dance can look like in video form. NBFF has 4 categories for submissions: short series, general, documentaries, and kids. For more information on how to apply, visit filmfreeway.com/KNOW BOX Dance Film Festival.
I think, continuing as I review financials, how healthy is your organization? Is it
and
sustainable?
When you're looking at, let's say, a younger organization, or I shouldn't even say younger, how about this? An organization with a much smaller budget, what are you looking for in the financials compared to organizations who have, over $150,000?
Right. And even for them, how are they using their money? How is your organization funded? Do you get paid, or do your employees, if you have employees or contract artists or contractors in general, do they get paid any kind of salary?
And do you think that if they do get paid, that's a good thing? I'll be honest, so for No Box, we pay our team contractor fees based on the service that they're doing for the organization.
Right.
A lot of what they do is volunteer based, but there are certain things administratively that they get contract fees for.
Right.
Because we personally value paying artists for doing the work, or just paying people in general.
Exactly.
We provide honorariums for our makers and things like that. But do you see a value in that as a reviewer? Are you looking for people who are sacrificing themselves and not paying themselves? Or what are you looking for?
I'm looking for what you just said. That whole, we believe in paying our artists, paying our contractors. And therefore, if you believe in it, you're going to make sure that you budget just right so that every year it grows. Your contractor base grows. Or we have an employee, our first employee, and we're still...
I can't wait for that day.
Oh, I know.
I cannot wait.
I know. That's more attractive to see that, their sustainability first. No, that's horrible. That means, I've been in an org where the executive director did not take home anything, and it was volunteer based. Everybody's sweating, and it was hardcore. I'd rather let's just say there's volunteer based, but you still find a way to run payroll for yourself who has to do X, Y, Z, because then it becomes a different narrative of I do all this stuff and I don't take home, and I need y'all take home a salary, and I need y'all to understand. That's not cute either.
That sounds like a lot of ego.
It's better to, work towards sustainability, hopefully getting mentors and more information about what grant should we go for? How should we think about programming where we are? We do position ourselves in such a way where people want to fund these programs, where then it's oh, great, now we need an education director over this. Or say it's for the festival, oh, we need this total full-time managing director that can do X, Y, and Z, and then contract out these 10 people or these 5 more people. So it's looking at money, the way you manage money in that way.
Something we've been talking a lot about this season is how to find your donor base. Where would you recommend an emerging artist or a younger organization to start?
Yeah. You can always start, many people start grassroots, which is, the friends that you have, family members who are going to donate back to you. You'll, of course, do your regular grants that you can find anywhere for artists or nonprofits or LLCs. And I, don't only want to talk to nonprofit people, because there are LLCs, there are independent artists that are fiscally sponsored.
Yeah, that's great. Let's kind of segue into that, and then we can always circle back to talking about funding. So you do have an LLC now. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why you chose to go the LLC route versus a sole proprietorship or nonprofit?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was about number one, I do wear many hats. So Parable Brands and Services is a larger umbrella for doing business as photo noir, because I'm a photographer. Parable Consulting, because I may consult on education, arts programming. And Peace and Possibility, which is my online retail store that I sell soaps and like face washes and, dragon's blood smudges and crystals. And also, if I ever want to expand into Parable Arts to do like programming, if I got funding from, we'll say, Office of Arts and Culture or the Parks and Rec, and I wanted to do classes, right? Then I made DBA Parable Arts, so I can put that name forward and, get funding that goes in, and then later do a payroll for myself or do consulting and pay out different artists, things like that. Now, if I wanted to, I could also, like, for instance, if I was like, man, Parable Arts, I really want to put up this show. Maybe my fiscal sponsor is AT&T Performing Arts Center for the Elevator Project, like they've done for Bond and Coral and other artists, right? Maybe it's the Salmon Center. Maybe it's even Karamia has been a fiscal sponsor for someone in order for them to apply for a grant for a specific project. I think that, there's less at stake to just go that route. And you can, you still have the fiscal responsibilities that you need to take care of. But you just won't get certain foundations and certain grants. But there's so many artists. Danielle Giorgio, her dance group, she's been around for 12 years.
We've had her on the show, too.
Exactly.
Go back and listen to our episode with Danielle.
And she has been able to get funded and fund her dancers over those years, right? So that's
because there's so many different pathways to creating financial security and stability as an organization and as a company. And nonprofit is not the only route.
It's not.
We actually started No Box Dance first was a sole proprietorship before we decided that nonprofit was the route that served our organization. We kind of listened to what we were doing to kind of see which route would make most sense for us. And so I'm curious, like, why did you choose the LLC route?
Just for me, because I'm doing so many different things, it just made more, like, I'm not at the point where it's like, I'm just doing Parable Arts and I'm going to do a nonprofit. No, I'm selling soaps and I'm taking photos.
Your product.
And these products and these services. So it made sense for me as Morgana Wilborn, the only person in this to do that, right? And I'm only paying contractors to work on a website or to be my influencer for marketing. Like that totally makes sense. Now, if I wanted Parable Arts to grow, and I have established programming, I've created budgets, I show fiscal, responsibility and evidence of that. And I have people that are interested in me, like we'll say the city of Dallas and other potential donors, then maybe I need to think about going the route of a nonprofit. But for me, it doesn't serve that purpose right now.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this because I think for our listeners, it's really important to understand all the possible pathways because there's not just one pathway. And your pathway can also change as you evolve as an organization or a person, what your interests lie in. You mentioned fiscal sponsorship, which is something that we haven't talked about at all on the show, but I think it's really important to discuss. Could you talk a little bit about what fiscal sponsorship is and maybe your experience with that?
Yeah, so when you have a fiscal sponsor, they're usually an entity that it's like we had this at DNA Works, and we started out with Fractured Atlas and then got a new fiscal sponsor. But with Fractured Atlas, they're the umbrella nonprofit. And they sponsor orgs to go through them in order to apply to grants. And they may take, not necessarily from that grant, because it can be illegal, but they may take a fee for service from that. from doing their service work, and serving these orgs in that way. Basically, like, I will be this umbrella nonprofit entity that you can work with in order to get your project up and going. We should always think about, if we're artists, how do we turn our patron base to a donor base?
So I want to ask you that.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
You're going to...
Because that's something that we're, right now in our second year as a nonprofit, we're having lots of conversations about sustainability as an organization. And of course, financial sustainability, but also sustainability within our communities that we're serving. And so, like, how do you think one might approach turning their patrons into their donors?
Like, you're going to literally have to know who your patrons are. And sometimes you do. And you just never know who happens to have the extra funding that could benefit you. And sometimes it's hard when you're working with certain venues or what have you, or in workshops with parents. You don't know who, but you have to collect that data. You have to make sure you build rapport and relationships with everyone, because your patrons are your adult patrons and your youth patrons that will become adults and alumni of your programming that will give back. And I've seen it. And we have to make sure not to discount them as well. But it's
so challenging, because I feel like what we're negotiating right now is we're art service organizations. So a lot of people we're serving are the artists, right? And it's like the filmmakers that are part of our festival that then we're giving those honorariums to, and things like that.
Who comes to the festival to view?
Well, yes, exactly. So we're learning that we have different audience groups.
You sure do.
It's not just our artists that we're serving, but we also have the community that we're serving when we're having our live in-person events. And we also have our podcast listeners.
Exactly.
Y'all are listening right now. So we're learning kind of how are they all connected, but how do we make sure we're serving each of these groups of audiences differently, because they have different needs.
Yeah.
No Box Dance is now on Patreon. Gain access to our community resources, early access to Dance Behind the Screen podcast episodes like this one, membership in our creative book club, personalized dance film feedback, and more. Visit patreon.com/KNOWBOXDance to select the membership level that is right for you.
So it's just really honing in the patrons that are like, I'm your biggest fan, or like the family members that are like, I've been coming year after year to the festival, or like, I just love when my son or daughter does this. You're my person. You're my person. And you never know. They could first start out as volunteers. Maybe they give $5, maybe they give $50, and maybe they bring, a person on, et cetera, et cetera. It can grow in different directions.
And it sounds like, for us and through our other conversations on the show, building a donor base is just another way of thinking about community building.
Yes.
Which is what I want to talk to you about next. I know you have lots of experience kind of in organizing community as your role as a managing director for different companies. So I guess, how do you think about community organizing, and what strategies have you found successfully really connect and empower people?
The most important strategy is intentionality. And like releasing words like target demographic, target audience. We shouldn't be using that anyways. But like and we want everyone to come to our things, right? Because we create diverse programming reflective of our community. That's where it begins. If it's reflective of our community, how am I in the community to know what they want? Am I going to no box events? Am I going to next to that no box event? Am I going to that bakery next door? Am I going to? Am I knowing who's on my city council? Am I knowing my arts commissioners? Am I knowing any given bank around, et cetera, and the schools around? Am I making sure that when I produce different marketing materials, that it's bilingual, reflective of the largest populations in Dallas, and making sure that I'm intentional about reaching organizations and communities that may not speak those specific languages, that may not be where we are intentional. We'll just use, for Dallas and Texas, the intentionality of bilingual in Spanish. Well, we also know there are neighborhoods that have multiple languages, right? When we think about Vickery Meadows, who am I talking to in the organizations that service those even more uniquely diverse communities to make sure that I am preparing materials, having artists that are reflective to them, or music or theater or etc., that they feel a heartfelt attachment. Am I just doing that as a one-off so I can get butts and seats, which is a horrible tag word that we need to release? Or am I truly getting to know them, right? Break bread, break borders doesn't exist because it's a one-off experience. It's really choosing to know the plight of these women, these beautiful women who use their gifts to serve. How do I get to know each of those women in their communities to make sure I highlight who they are? And reciprocity, intentionality is the name of the game. And we have to just keep showing up, which is draining for, nonprofit or admins or artists, right? But the work must be done because we want them to continue the conversation and we want them to become donors and we want them to be the future artists when we leave the org behind.
That's beautiful, Morgana. Can you talk about more specific examples about how organizations can actually reach different populations in different communities? For instance, like one thing that we've done at No Box Dance, and I'll speak to here in Dallas specifically, is from the beginning of our film festival, we would have our screenings at many different events.
Right.
And we've tried lots of different locations as a way of trying to connect with different communities of people. So that's kind of one of our strategies. And we do the same thing for our screenings in Seoul, South Korea, and in Oaxaca, Mexico as well. It didn't always start at the venues that they are now.
Right.
There was a lot of different venues that we would try to target, and I'm using the word target on myself. But Excel word out of my vocabulary. That's the marketing person in me. But we try to reach these different and connect with these different communities by also partnering with already established venues. And that's been something that's worked really well for us, because in our conversation specifically with Wilbur, who is the head of our MBFF in Mexico, a lot of our conversations were like, a lot of American companies, US-based companies, will go to Mexico with like a product, a dance performance or something like that, and then just like show it and then leave. And it didn't necessarily continue or support the community that exists there. And I think that's the same for anywhere, especially when you have this like arts programming that you're wanting to share. We don't want to just like push it onto people, but rather how are we like connecting and collaborating with things that already exist within the community. So I'm wondering, do you have like one or two practical tips for our listeners on how they might approach expanding their communities?
And I think sometimes like some creators, the work is chosen really late. So it can be they're in a fast fury over 1 month or so to get an audience. And I think if you know some of the work beforehand, that's really easy. And you can just start going to events that are in alignment, in these communities, even if it's festivals or whatever, and just saying, oh my gosh, I love this. It reminds me of this film that we're showing at No Box Dance. Having those unique conversations. Being there. We have to show up. We can't expect reciprocity. We can't expect people to come to us. We must first go to them and get to know them. And then they ask us our story, right? And then we share who we are and what we do. Like a lot of people know me for only one thing, as a photographer or as this. And then when they get to know me, they're like, you do all this? Yes, because I show up for you first. And I may have
where your one hat.
I may have. So like when we show up to these communities that may be different from ours, maybe a different experience than what we hope to sell or whatever, we first show up as a patron and let them get to know us, talk to a few people, have genuine connection, invite them in. And then you just go from there. That's one approach. Giving out different styles of like workshops or classes, even if it's free, that doesn't mean we want to come with a savioristic type of expectation. Like, I'm giving these free classes to this community. No, that's not it. You just want to create buzz, right? You want to create interest. And then, maybe you're just talking a little bit about it because it's like mixed into a Bible study. I don't know, that's so random. Or into a cooking class because there's some kind of weird mix. And they are like viewing this reading, presentation, talk, or short film right before this next aspect, excuse me. So just thinking about like, what are the unique ways I can either go meet people or work with other organizations where we can partner and mix in, right? We may not see the benefit just yet, but we may see it later. It's not going to be quick and fast. That's why you have to have that intentional strategy. You can't expect people to come and they don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's just like relationships. In my interview with Christina, she works for Visit Dallas.
Oh, Christina,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about like networking and how it's really just like people connecting to people. And at the end of the day, I think that's what everything really is. Like, it sounds so simple and kind of cliche, but I feel like it's just like being intentional with the relationships that you're building with people, whether they're people that you want to become patrons or donors or your new friend or something like that.
People you can learn from, people you want to befriend, and those people will give back, and you can be an unknowing salesperson with just genuine connection, just sharing your story.
Well, Morgana, I'm so glad that you made time to share your story with me and with our listeners. This has been such a great episode. We went down routes that I was not expecting to go.
We did. But Thank you all for following my Piscean speech.
I love it. Does social media influence the dance world? And if so, how does it influence your work?
Yeah, I think some of the greatest geniuses are dancers, dance artists, dance creators. No disrespect to how you present yourself in the world. And I think it's the easiest thing I can read. I love going to dance performances because I can actually read the story. That's so weird to say. And I think even when we see these quick TikToks or we see these small clips, I'm pulled in and I want to learn more. I want to learn. I want to create. And so for so long, many dance creators have tried to dismantle the classes system within dance. And we have social media, which we can merge the immediate, we can merge the scholarly, we can merge the technical.
You get to wear all the hats.
You get to wear all the hats. And now you have this beautiful broadened audience where when I first saw dance, people can, like in person, people can see it and hope that one day they can go to a No Box Film Festival with their guardian and go watch it or by themselves. Or they can go to Dallas Black Dance and take a class, or any other one of our arts leaders who do it in a rec center or at a public forum, or with a choreographer at a free Public Works Dallas workshop or rehearsal. And so, but it takes just that little glimpse on that phone, to take us there, to practice, to dream, to imagine.
How do you say no to the box? That's our tagline here at Box Dance.
I think I said it over and over again. I draw boundaries with things that no longer serve me, and I step out on faith. That's like a drawing of another box and then stepping out into my own. And I may step out on faith, directing play or a musical that I've never had, or I'm stepping out on faith, creating my own LLC with a bunch of random things, right? That people have to piece it together and understand about me. But I'm saying no to these energies that want to conform me, that want to say no to me, that want to say that I'll never do it. I draw my boundary with them and I step out on faith. And I keep going.
Okay, we have our last segment, which is called our Flash 4, where we like to ask all our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash. So as fast as possible.
Okay, I'm long-winded.
Okay, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, if you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be? Book, podcast, social account?
I really just want you all to, I work at Taka. Look at what amplifier workshops we have and upcoming programming. And also just look what everybody else is doing. What's out there from all of the nonprofits.
That's great. What was the first dance you saw?
When I was little, my mom was considering allowing me to take dance classes at Dallas Black Dance. And I saw not the performance yet, but the young ladies dancing in class. And I fell in love.
Oh, that gives me tears. That's so special. Do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world, yes or no?
I'm going to say yes, because even with the non-trained dancers, somebody's watching that and dreaming of doing more.
And what is your favorite social media platform?
Oh, yeah, Instagram.
So that's your main squeeze.
That's my main squeeze. I love her.
Well, thank you again, Morgana, so much for coming on our show. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that you share with our listeners today?
I just want any artists or small orgs to know that there's so many resources and people out there. I think about you and just how welcoming and warm you are. And I just want people to come to No Box and learn more and learn from you all, because you all are growing. There are arts administrators out here, like I talk about my friend Rhiannon Martin or Mercedes Brown or Danielle Giorgio, and there's so many people who may not get recognition where they work, but let me tell you, they know what they're doing and what they're talking about. I'm not going to say stalk these people, but I'm going to say, visit them on LinkedIn, who they know, what events are happening. Go to them, create relationships, and learn. You never know who may be valuable for your board or for your next program, patron, or potential donor.
That's fantastic, Morgana. And I do have to say, we have Rhiannon coming on the podcast as well. So now we definitely need Mercedes to get all your recommendations.
Please.
So if we want people to come to you and stay connected with you, how can they find you? Where should they go?
I am very easy to Google. If you look up Morgana Wilborn online, you can find me. You can find my social. I would love to stay connected, whether you're searching photo noir or parable or peace and possibility, you will see my face and you will find me. I'm going to be directing for the festival A Light in Dark Places in April, as well as at UNT in around September for Peter and the Starcatcher. So you'll be able to find me in and around, friends.
Well, thank you again, Morgana, for coming on our show. This has been such a great conversation.
It's been so great. Thank you so much.
Dance Behind the Screen podcast is produced by No Box Dance, an art service organization that creates, collaborates, and discusses art with artists and the public. Dance Behind the Screen podcast is co-hosted by Azaria Hogans, Raina Mondragon, Martheya Nygaard, and Yejin Choi, with sound designed by Daniel Rosas.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.